Alright, so over the past few weeks I've gone over a ton of different games thanks to the summer sale, but now that the summer sale is firmly in the rearview mirror, or at least mostly in the rearview, because I'll probably still do a pickups video next week, but mostly in the rearview, let's look ahead to some of the games that are coming out in August, because there's a lot of great stuff coming down the pike. There's some really interesting looking indie titles that are coming out, and some legitimate AAA heavy hitters, and I think that's probably as good a place as any to start, as we do have Baldur's Gate 3, I believe, dropping officially on August 3rd. Alright, so full disclosure, I am speaking from a position of ignorance here, because I've never played a Baldur's Gate game before, although it looks like you can play this game now, albeit in early access. But from what I've read online, you may want to hold off until the official release of this game, just because apparently your progress will not carry over to the full launch, so yeah, all I can really tell you is that it's a beloved series rooted in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, and early footage of this looks extremely polished. Granted, that probably assumes you're a fan of turn-based combat that plays out in that D&D fashion, but assuming that you are, and based on the hype alone, I'm guessing Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be one of the biggest hits of the year. Right now it's listed as playable on the deck, which is encouraging, and you might assume based on a more limited top-down perspective that this means it will automatically perform great on the deck, and while I hope that's the case, I have seen similar experiences like Marvel's Midnight Suns or Diablo 4, where these types of games ran serviceably but not necessarily exceptionally, so we'll just have to wait and see once it finally releases how well it's actually going to perform in that format. Next up is a game that I suspect will run very well on the Steam Deck as a bona fide boomer shooter, and that is Sprawl, dropping on August 17th. I don't even remember where I learned about this game, and I was completely surprised to see that it was already on my wish list, and the thing that jumped out to me immediately was the very Yoji Shinkawa-esque cover art for the game that immediately made me think of his artwork from games like Metal Gear Solid or Death Stranding. But this is neither a stealth action game nor a sprawling open world UPS simulator, rather Sprawl is billing itself as a hardcore retro FPS set in an endless cyberpunk megalopolis. Now that's a surefire way to get my attention, and looking at the gameplay so far, this looks fast, kinetic, and just exceedingly violent. And considering the protagonist, Seven, also has a mysterious voice in her head that's pushing her to survive, I think this one's going to be a whole lot of fun, probably run pretty well on the Steam Deck, and it's definitely near the top of my list for games I'm most looking forward to next month. Speaking of retro-inspired first-person shooters, albeit with a roguelike element to it, we have another game in that vein dropping the next day on the 18th, and that is Voidborn. This shooter also looks to place an emphasis on speed with roguelike elements, but rather than a futuristic setting, you'll be plunged into an ever-changing dark fantasy world playing as a Voidborn, a powerful being created by the Divine Lord. Technically speaking, it looks like it's really channeling that low-poly PS1 aesthetic, but artistically I'm kind of excited to check out the demo for this one because the environments are really reminding me of the Bloodborne remake that I played a while back. And just like that remake, I imagine this is exactly how Yharnam might have looked had it released on the original PlayStation. Also, mechanically, it looks like it may be paying homage to Bloodborne because it features the ability to enlist help from various covenants within the game, which kind of reminds me of summoning helpful NPCs occasionally to offset the difficulty curve of some towering boss. Now personally I'm a little bit burnt out on roguelikes, but I have to admit the premise is at least intriguing, so if you're a fan of retro first-person affairs, both Voidborn and Sprawl look like they'll be solid options to check out next month. Next up, taking a turn towards horror, we do have another licensed asymmetrical multiplayer horror game that's dropping next month on the same day as Voidborn, and that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, coming on August 18th. And I really want to be excited for this one, and to a degree I am, but I'm also a little tepid on Texas Chainsaw Massacre only because of the Friday the 13th drama and how that kinda left a sour taste in my mouth. And that's a shame because games like Dead by Daylight, Friday the 13th, and maybe to a lesser degree Hunt Showdown are tremendous fun when you have a good group of people available to play. But it's probably not fair for me to judge Texas Chainsaw Massacre purely against the sins and missteps of other games in the genre, so I'm gonna do my best to keep an open mind. Plus, to their credit, early gameplay certainly looks promising. They've got the look and feel down for sure, and it's crossplay enabled at launch, which should maximize the pool of players available to just jump right in. I think its success will really hinge on making sure both playing as the killers and the survivors are both enjoyable. Not every asymmetrical horror game gets this right, and I'm sure it's hard to find the right balance of ensuring that neither side is overpowered given the asymmetrical nature of, a multiplayer cat and mouse game. But again, so far Survivor gameplay looks tense, and playing as Leatherface in particular looks appropriately grisly. And something else to keep in mind is this is going to be a day one release on Game Pass, so if you're a subscriber to that, definitely something to keep in mind because at that point, what do you have to lose trying it out? Next up is another first-person game that I hesitate to call a shooter, even though I think technically that's exactly what it is. It just feels weird because it's a high fantasy setting, and that would be Immortals of Aveum, dropping on August 22nd. Now, based on the title alone, if I'm being honest, this is a game I would probably gloss right over because, not to be too judgy, but Immortals of Aveum just sounds like pretty generic high fantasy nonsense, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to hear this is some sort of pay-to-win mobile game. But the more I've looked into it, the more promising it appears, because this really is just a fantasy first-person shooter swapping out guns for magical spells that maybe copy Doctor Strange's homework a little too closely in spots. But I have to say I'm intrigued based on the raw gameplay I've seen so far. I'm still a little hesitant based on some lackluster spell-slinging high fantasy games I've seen over the past few years, like Godfall or Forspoken, but hey, just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm going to try and keep my biases in check as much as I'm able and keep a close eye on the reviews when this one drops. Now this next game is the one that I am personally the most excited about in August. It's not going to be for everybody, and as much as I'm excited for it, I'm also afraid of it because I am sure the difficulty is going to be absolutely brutal, and that is Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon, coming on August 28th. And again, very excited for this as my first ever Armored Core game, but still a little hesitant because after watching a little bit of Vodividge's early gameplay preview from a recent video, there's a lot going on here. If you're not familiar, this is a mech-based vehicular combat game where you pilot an armored core, which you can then customize and fine-tune with a variety of weapons and upgrades, and if you thought the stat readout on something like Dark Souls could be confusing, Fires of Rubicon looks to up the ante significantly, so I'm sure as my first time with an Armored Core game, there's going to be a really steep learning curve here. And while I've appreciated some mech-based games in the past, like Mech Assault or Daemon X Machina, this looks to be a different beast entirely, and as the first Armored Core game in over a decade, I'm sure fans will be absolutely rabid to hop in when it drops next month. And last but not least, coming out on the 29th is a game that I'm excited for, but also a little bit saddened by for reasons I'll get to in a second, but that would be Sea of Stars, coming on August 29th. On the one hand, this game looks like an absolutely brilliant recreation of the RPGs of yesteryear, and it's already shaping up to be a gorgeous game. However, I'm a little saddened by it because apparently this game is a prequel to The Messenger, which I have begun but have not yet finished, so I really need to get on that. I don't think you'll need to beat The Messenger to have fun with Sea of Stars, but it sure can't hurt, and based on how much people love The Messenger, not just for its style and mechanics, but also for the unique way that it told its story, I'm really going to try to put a rush on that one and rescue it from the backlog before Sea of Stars drops. But rather than an action platformer, Sea of Stars is a top-down RPG revolving around puzzle solving and turn-based combat, where you'll be controlling up to 6 player characters. And it looks like it's taking pretty heavy inspiration from games like Chrono Trigger or Illusion of Gaia. The presentation alone would have piqued my interest here, but seeing as how it's also an expansion of what I guess is now the Messenger universe, this is one I'll definitely be keeping an eye on. And if this looks interesting to you as well, there is a demo available that you can grab right now if you just want to get a better idea of what you'll be looking at when the game launches. Alright, and that's it for this one, and as is routine for these videos, clearly this is not a comprehensive list of every PC game that is dropping next month, and also we don't have any guarantees that every game on this list will run great on the Steam Deck. We just kind of have to take a wait-and-see approach. But hey, what about you? Are there any games that I did not touch on or something that you are very excited for to drop in August? If so, please do let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for your time, have an amazing day, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.